Right, I want to talk about Nintendo. Now, those of you that know me will be thinking, Noct, why are you talking about Nintendo? You don't even own a Switch. What are you doing? And to be fair, that's a good question. But my journey into gaming started with and has always sort of been inspired by Nintendo. My earliest memories of gaming were playing the frankly terrifying Charlie and the Chocolate Factory game for the Game Boy Advanced. I don't know why, but this game gave me nightmares. The only reason that my relationship with Nintendo games ended with the 2DS was financial. I had to pick between a PS5 and a Switch, and I picked the PS5. The Switch is still on my list of things to get. It just keeps getting pushed down in priority by boring things like food and rent. I don't know why 2/3 of my wages go to a 1996 musical by Jonathan Larson, but I have been told that it's standard for my area. To me, Nintendo has always been a standout among the major gaming companies. And I split these companies into three groups that I think help highlight why I think that. First, you have the old guard. These are companies like Sega and Atari. They laid their claim back in the 80s. They made a name for themselves. And they laid down the foundations for everything that we as gamers hold dear. Unfortunately, they couldn't quite keep up with the whims of the gaming community, and so most of them either fizzled out into insignificance in modern gaming, or they ceased to exist at all. Then we have the new kids, by which I mean companies and brands like PlayStation and Xbox. I say new in quotations because most of these aren't that much newer than the old guard. They started to appear in the 90s and they sort of piggybacked on the popularity of home gaming that the old guard had created. Most of these companies are still around, and it's because they managed to adapt fast enough to keep up with the desires of their clientele. Finally, we have Nintendo. They've just got to be in a group on their own. They are as old, if not older, than the companies in the old guard, and they existed far before that as a general gaming company rather than a video game company. But unlike the old guard, they're still here, so they can't be the old guard. And unlike the new kids, their survival wasn't based on adapting to suit their fan base. Instead, they looked at what the other companies were making, and they made something different. And they did it with a sort of innocence that I can't really describe. And I'm not even sure innocence is the right word. Nintendo is the family console, and it has been for a really long time. Whilst the new kids are chucking all of their funding at yet another first-person shooter, but this time with even more realistic blood splatter, Nintendo is making something different. And when Nintendo makes it, you can play it with your kids in the room. And we as gamers eat it up. Let's just look at the best sellers for the big three. That's Nintendo, Sony and Microsoft. I'm going to be comparing sales of games for the Xbox One, PS4 and Wii U, which were all released between 2012 and 2013, just so that we've got a similar time frame for when we're comparing. So, the best-selling PS4 game is Marvel Spider-Man, with 20 million sales worldwide. Spoiler alert, this is a game that includes a terrorist attack and biological warfare, as well as a lot of punching, shooting, and perhaps most dangerous of all, zingy one-liners. The best-selling Xbox One game is Halo 5 Guardians, with over 10 million sales worldwide. This is a game where you are sent to fight off a seemingly infinite number of invading aliens. It's one of those FPSs I was talking about earlier, and is one of a long line of FPSs that take up a huge chunk of Microsoft's game development funds. So, we've got two very intense, quite violent games, but what does Nintendo have to offer? The best-selling Wii U game is Mario Kart 8, with 8.46 million sales worldwide. This is a game where you race go-karts as your favourite cartoon video game characters. Sounds very gruesome. So, let's look at the number 2 bestsellers as well. The number 2 bestseller for PS4 was God of War, with 19.5 million copies sold. This was a gripping story about a retired god killer, that is, a god that kills, and a guy that kills gods. This was also a reboot of an already tragic and violent series of games. It was an amazing game that I've only just finished myself, but it does seem to fit the trend I'm talking about. The Xbox One's second biggest seller was PUBG Battlegrounds, with 9 million copies sold. Put simply, this is a battle royale game where you have to kill everyone else to win. So basically a Black Friday sale. And for the Wii U, we have Super Mario World 3D. And for the Wii U, we have Super Mario 3D World. Fun for all the family. Need I go on? Now, this isn't a criticism of other developers or companies. I love these games, and as I mentioned, I chose the PS5 over the Switch. I just think that it's fantastic that Nintendo can keep up with, and sometimes surpass, these huge companies without relying on gore and tragedy to sell. They do things differently, and I really like it. It's the same reason that I love to try games from smaller independent developers. I like seeing something that's a bit different, instead of just a wall of first-person shooter war simulators and the same open world game 50 times over, but with a slightly different cosmetic. Nintendo always seems to provide that variety. Now, I will concede that many people choose their console based on the games available to play on it. So these figures don't tell us the whole story. But the fact that they're comparable in size does tell us that a similar number of people are buying Nintendo for the experience it provides as the number of people buying Xbox and PlayStation for the experiences they provide. In fact, many people buy Nintendo as their secondary console because they can't get the experience they're looking for on the console they already have. But that's just my opinion. What do you think? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.